Welcome all to today's lecture on Postcolonial Studies. I am Dr. D. Ghayathry, Associate Professor of English from Sri Sharda College for Women. In this video, we are going to see about Introduction to Postcolonial Studies. Let's start the video with the Introduction to Postcolonial Studies. Before getting into the details regarding the Postcolonial Studies, let's start the term colonialism and its definition and its impact. Colonialism is the practice of one country extending control over another territory, often through settlement, economic exploitation, and cultural domination. It typically involves the political and economic subjugation of the colonized people, reshaping their societies in ways that benefit the colonizers. Colonialism can be categorized into the following types. Settler colonialism. Under this category, colonizers settle permanently, displacing indigenous populations. Example, British colonization of Australia, Canada, and the United States. Under exploitation colonialism, in which colonizers extract resources without settling in large numbers. Example, British rule in India. Coming to trade colonialism, it has a control over trade routes and economic systems. Example, European presence in the Indian Ocean trade networks. Under the category internal colonialism, the oppression of minority groups within a nation and the treatment of indigenous peoples in post-colonial states can be seen in detail. Coming to the major effects of colonialism, we can see economic exploitation, cultural and linguistic influences, political boundaries, and resistance and nationalism. Coming to economic exploitation, where colonizers extracted wealth, raw materials, and labor. Moving on to cultural and linguistic influence, it deals with the European languages, religions, and values were imposed on colonized societies. And in political boundaries, artificial borders drawn by colonizers led to conflicts. Under resistance and nationalism, colonial rule led to independent movements. So now we move on to postcolonialism, its definition and the key ideas. Postcolonialism is a critical framework that examines the effects of colonialism on former colonies, exploring themes of identity, power, resistance, and cultural hybridity. It looks at how colonial histories continue to shape societies even after political independence. What are the key concepts in postcolonial theory? First one, colonial discourse. Western literature and media portray the East as exotic, inferior, and in need of Western control. Example, the depiction of Middle Eastern and South Asian cultures in European literature. Coming to hybridity and cultural identity, colonized societies develop hybrid identities blending native and colonial cultures. Example, Midnight's Children by Salman Rushdie explores Indian identity after British rule. Moving on to subaltern studies, the voices of the colonized, especially marginalized groups, women, are often silenced. Why is postcolonialism important? It challenges Eurocentric histories and perspectives. It gives voice to colonized peoples and their experiences. It critiques the lasting effects of colonial rule on politics, economics, and culture. Postcolonial theory is a critical framework that examines the lasting impact of colonialism on former colonies, focusing on themes of power, identity, resistance, and cultural hybridity. It critiques how colonial narratives continue to shape literature, history, and global relations after independence. Coming to the key thinkers and concepts in postcolonial theory, we have Edward Said. is Orientalism. The West, the Europe and America, constructs the Orient, Middle East, Asia as exotic, backward and inferior to justify colonial control. Example, Western literature which portrays the East as mysterious or dangerous. Coming to hybridity and mimicry part. Hybridity, where colonized societies develop in-between identities blending indigenous and colonial cultures. Coming to mimicry, colonized people imitate the colonized language, dress and customs but in ways that subtly resist colonial authority. Example, English educated elites in India under British rule. Coming to the subaltern part, Can the Subaltern Speak by Ghayathry Spivak. The subaltern oppressed groups, especially women in colonized societies, are often silenced in history. Example, women's voices in colonial records are often missing. Frantz Fanon, The Wretched of the Earth, in which colonialism dehumanizes the colonized, leading to psychological trauma. He argues that violent resistance is sometimes necessary for decolonization. Example, the Algerian struggle against French rule. So, what are the themes which can be discussed in post-colonial literature? Colonial oppression and resistance. Best example is Things Fall Apart by Achibi, Hybridity and Identity Crisis by Rushdie's, Midnight's Children, Silencing of the Subaltern, then Legacy of Slavery and Racism, in which Beloved can be the best example, best suited. It is written by Toni Morrison. So again, various themes in post-colonial literature in which it explores the effects of colonialism and its aftermath, focusing on themes of identity, power, cultural conflict and resistance. Here are some major themes with examples. Colonial oppression and resistance examines the violence, exploitation and oppression under colonial rule, often highlighting resistance and rebellion. So example, Things Fall Apart, where depicts the impact of British colonialism on Igbo society and the resistance of the protagonist. Coming to hybridity and cultural identity, colonized people develop a hybrid identity caught between indigenous and colonial cultures. Example, Midnight's Children, in which it explores post-independence India where characters navigate a mix of British and Indian influences. Coming to the next section, The Subaltern and Silencing. The subaltern, the oppressed groups, especially women, peasants and indigenous peoples, are often denied a voice in history and literature. Example, The God of Small Things by Arundhati Roy. It highlights caste, colonial legacy and the silencing of marginalized voices in India. The Other and Orientalism, in which colonized people are often portrayed as the other, exotic, primitive or dangerous by Western literature. Example, Heart of Darkness by Joseph Conrad. Coming to the next part, Postcolonial Feminism and Gender, which examines how colonialism and patriarchy intersect, often highlighting the struggles of women in postcolonial societies. Example, Sula by Toni Morrison, where it addresses the legacy of slavery and racial oppression in America. Moving on to the next section, Trauma and Psychological Effects of Colonialism by Frantz Fanon, in which it explores the mental and emotional damage caused by colonial violence and displacement. Example, The Wretched of Earth by Frantz Fanon, where it analyzes how colonialism leads to psychological trauma and violence. Moving on to the last section, Neo-colonialism and Globalization, where it deals with even after independence, economic and cultural dominance by Western powers continues through globalization and capitalism. Example, Americana, which explores migration, race and postcolonial identity in a globalized world. Now we come to the postcolonial theory and the key ideas which is used in poetry. Postcolonial poetry serves as a powerful medium for expressing the struggles, resistance, and identity crisis of formerly colonized nations. Rooted in postcolonial theory, this poetry critiques colonial oppression, reclaims indigenous voices, and challenges Eurocentric narratives. Coming to resistance and anti-colonial struggle, the main key idea in poetry, where poetry has been a tool for resisting colonial rule and expressing nationalist sentiments. This aspect can be seen in Leopold Senghor's In Memoriam. In Memoriam is a reflective poem by Leopold Sédar Senghor, a renowned poet and the first president of Senegal. Senghor, a co-founder of the Negritude movement, sought to celebrate African culture and identity through his literary works. The poem opens with the speaker expressing a sense of alienation and apprehension on a Sunday, observing the city from a metaphorical tower of glass filled with pain. This imagery suggests a separation from the external world and an internal struggle. The speaker reflects on his ancestors and the enduring impact of colonial history, symbolized by the mingling of blood in the streets, which evokes the collective suffering and resilience of his people. The poem transitions between the landscapes of Africa, mentioning rivers like the Gambia and Salome, and the urban setting of Paris, highlighting the speaker's connection to both his heritage and his current environment. The plea to remember and honor the ancestors underscores their protective presence and the enduring influence of cultural roots. The poem concludes with a desire to reconnect with humanity, symbolized by brothers with blue eyes, with hard hands, indicating a yearning for unity beyond racial and cultural divides. Senghor's In Memoriam dwells into themes of memory, identity, and the enduring legacy of ancestors, reflecting the poet's contemplation of his cultural heritage and personal experiences within the broader context of history and diaspora. Moving on to the next aspect, the subaltern and the silenced voices, in which poetry gives voice to marginalized and oppressed groups, particularly women, peasants, and indigenous people. This aspect is substantiated through Grace Nichols' In My Name. In My Name is a poignant poem by Grace Nichols, a Guyanese poet renowned for her exploration of Caribbean heritage, female identity, and the legacy of slavery. This poem is part of her 1983 collection. The poem portrays a slave woman giving birth under harsh conditions, squatting over dry plantain leaves. She refers to her newborn with terms like my seedling and my strange mulatto, reflecting the complex emotions surrounding the child's mixed heritage and the circumstances of conception. Mulatto refers to children with white and black ancestry, and which also illustrates how the child was not born to the woman's husband but perhaps to a slave master. Despite these challenges, the mother offers protective prayers for her child, wishing for safety from various dangers. Nichols employs free verse in this poem, allowing for an unrestrained expression that mirrors the mother's fleeting sense of freedom during childbirth. The repetition of possessive phrases emphasizes the mother's deep connection to her child amidst adversity. Through In My Name, Nichols sheds light on the resilience of enslaved women, their maternal bonds, and their enduring hope for their children's futures. Coming to the next part, various themes analyzed in postcolonial poetry: loss and exile, cultural hybridity, resistance and nationalism, decolonization of language, gender and colonialism. Coming to the last section of the poetry, we have seen why postcolonial poetry matters, Postcolonial poetry is not just about history, it continues to shape identity, memory, and resistance in formerly colonized societies. In general, postcolonial works reclaim voices that colonialism tried to erase, creating a space for healing, critique, and cultural pride. So, with this, I conclude today's video and we move on to the MCQs. So, there are many questions where students can practice based on in this slide. I have given reference books which I referred for this video. Thank you.